My daughter has an imaginary friend. He told her I'm going to die. Chapter 1. The Whisper. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the backyard as Dr. Sarah Mitchell watched her 6-year-old daughter Emma through the kitchen window. The little girl sat cross-legged on the grass, her blonde curls catching the golden light as she gestured animatedly to an empty space beside her. Her lips moved in what appeared to be an earnest conversation, pausing occasionally as if listening to responses that only she could hear. Sarah smiled, remembering her own childhood companions. She had once had an elaborate tea party set up for her imaginary friend, a sophisticated cat named Mr. Whiskers, who wore a monocle and spoke with a British accent. It was perfectly normal for children Emma's age to have imaginary friends, especially after the upheaval of the past 6 months. The divorce from David had been finalized in March, and despite their mutual agreement that it was for the best, Sarah knew the separation had affected Emma deeply. The little girl had become quieter, more introspective, spending hours drawing pictures of their family before the split, always depicting the three of them together, as if willing their reunion through art. "Emma, sweetie, dinner's ready," Sarah called through the open window. Emma looked up, her bright blue eyes, so much like David's, focusing on her mother. "Just a minute, Mommy. Thomas is telling me something important." Thomas. Sarah raised an eyebrow. This was the first she'd heard of Thomas. "My friend," Emma replied matter-of-factly, turning back to her invisible companion. She nodded seriously at whatever she was hearing, then stood and brushed grass from her purple sundress. "Okay, I'm coming." As they sat down to dinner, grilled chicken, steamed broccoli, and Emma's favorite mac and cheese, Sarah tried to learn more about this new friend. "So tell me about Thomas," she said, cutting Emma's chicken into bite-sized pieces. "What does he look like?" Emma considered this carefully, twirling pasta around her fork. "He's bigger than me, but not as big as you. He has brown hair and sad eyes, and he wears old-fashioned clothes, like in the pictures at Grandma's house." "That sounds interesting. How long have you known Thomas?" "He says he's been here for a really long time, since before we moved to this house." Sarah nodded, filing away the detail. They had moved to this suburban home 8 months ago, shortly before the separation. It was a charming 2-story colonial built in the 1940s, with hardwood floors, built-in bookshelves, and a large front porch that had sold Sarah on the place immediately. The previous owners had maintained it beautifully, and she'd gotten it for a surprisingly good price. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the clink of silverware against plates and the distant hum of evening traffic. Then Emma suddenly stopped eating, her fork halfway to her mouth, her gaze fixed on the empty chair at the head of the table, David's old spot, which Sarah hadn't had the heart to remove yet. "What is it, honey?" Sarah followed her daughter's stare, but saw nothing unusual. Emma's expression grew solemn, far too serious for a 6-year-old. She set down her fork and looked directly at her mother with an intensity that made Sarah's stomach clench. "Thomas says you're going to die, Mommy." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her breath caught in her throat, and for a moment, the cheerful yellow kitchen seemed to dim around the edges. "What did you say?" "Thomas told me that you're going to die," Emma repeated with the same casual tone she might use to comment on the weather. "He wanted me to tell you so you can be careful." Sarah forced herself to breathe normally, reminding herself that children often said shocking things without understanding their impact. As a pediatrician, she'd heard countless examples of innocent statements that sounded alarming out of context. "Sweetie, sometimes imaginary friends say things that don't make sense," she said gently, reaching across the table to squeeze Emma's small hand. "Thomas is just pretend, remember? Like when you used to pretend your stuffed animals could talk." Emma shook her head with surprising firmness. "Thomas isn't pretend, Mommy. He's real, just different. And he never lies." The conviction in her daughter's voice sent a chill down Sarah's spine. She'd dealt with children's fantasies countless times in her practice, but something about Emma's demeanor felt different. There was no playfulness, no hint that she was engaging in make-believe. She spoke about Thomas with the same certainty she would use to describe her teacher or her best friend from school. Well, Sarah said, forcing brightness into her voice, why don't you tell Thomas that I'm perfectly healthy and plan to be around for a very long time? Emma tilted her head slightly, as if listening to something Sarah couldn't hear. Then she nodded. I told him. He says he hopes you're right, but that bad things can happen to good people. He knows because it happened to his mommy too. Sarah's appetite vanished completely. She pushed her plate away, her mind racing. The specificity of Emma's statements, the mature themes, the consistency of her responses. None of it fit the typical pattern of childhood imagination. Emma, has anyone been talking to you about death? Maybe someone at school or on TV? No, Mommy. Only Thomas. He's worried about you because he couldn't help his mommy in time, but he says he'll try to keep you safe if you listen to him. That night, after Emma was tucked into bed with her favorite story and a kiss goodnight, Sarah sat in her home office staring at her laptop screen. She typed children imaginary friends' death threats into the search bar, but hadn't pressed enter yet. Part of her was afraid of what she might find. Instead, she opened her medical journals and reviewed articles about childhood psychology and trauma responses. Everything she read supported her initial assessment. Imaginary friends were normal, especially for children processing difficult emotions. The content of Emma's conversations could be attributed to anxiety about the divorce, perhaps combined with exposure to adult conversations she wasn't supposed to hear. But as Sarah prepared for bed, checking the locks on all the doors and windows as had become her habit since David moved out, Emma's words echoed in her mind. He never lies. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows and sending shadows dancing across the walls. Sarah pulled the covers up to her chin and tried to push away the irrational fear that had taken root in her chest. Somewhere in the house, a floorboard creaked. Probably just the old house settling, she told herself. But she lay awake for hours, listening to every sound, unable to shake the feeling that something had fundamentally changed in their quiet suburban life. Chapter 2, Signs. The next morning arrived gray and drizzling, matching Sarah's mood as she prepared for another long day at Children's Memorial Hospital. Emma seemed back to her normal self, chattering about her upcoming school field trip while eating cereal, with no mention of Thomas or dire predictions. Maybe it had just been an isolated incident. Sarah thought hopefully. Children went through phases, and perhaps this was simply Emma's way of processing her fears about their new life situation. At the hospital, Sarah threw herself into her work with particular intensity, as if focusing on her patients could push away the lingering unease from the previous evening. She was examining 7-year-old Marcus Chun, who'd been brought in for recurring headaches, when her mind wandered to Emma's words. Thomas says you're going to die, Mommy. The stethoscope slipped from her fingers, clattering to the floor. Dr. Mitchell? Marcus's mother looked concerned. Are you all right? I'm sorry, Sarah said, retrieving the instrument with shaking hands. Just tired. Let me listen to his heart again. But as she placed the stethoscope on Marcus's chest, her hands were trembling so badly she could barely get an accurate reading. This wasn't like her. In 8 years of practice, she'd never allowed personal issues to interfere with patient care. The headaches seemed to be tension-related. She finally managed to tell Mrs. Chun, I'd like to schedule a follow-up in 2 weeks, and in the meantime, try to identify any stressors in Marcus's environment. After the Chuns left, Sarah's colleague Dr. Jennifer Hayes knocked on the examination room door. Rough morning, Jennifer asked, noting Sarah's pale complexion. Just distracted, Sarah admitted. Emma's been saying some concerning things lately. About the divorce? About death, actually. She has this new imaginary friend who apparently told her I'm going to die. Jennifer frowned, her expression shifting into professional mode. That's pretty heavy content for a 6-year-old's fantasy. Has she been exposed to any trauma recently? Beyond the obvious family changes, I mean. Not that I know of. She seems fine otherwise, eating well, sleeping through the night, excited about school activities. It's just this one thing. Children process stress in unpredictable ways, Jennifer said thoughtfully. Sometimes they create external threats as a way of expressing internal fears. The imaginary friend predicting your death could be Emma's way of voicing her terror that she'll lose you too, like she lost her father. It made sense, and Sarah felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. I scheduled an appointment with a child psychologist, just to be safe. Good idea. Dr. Foster in pediatric psychology is excellent if you need a recommendation. Sarah was about to respond when her pager buzzed with an emergency. She spent the rest of the morning in the NICU, helping stabilize a premature infant whose condition had suddenly deteriorated. The intensity of the case pushed all thoughts of Emma and Thomas from her mind. It wasn't until she was driving home that the morning's conversation returned to her thoughts. As she waited at a red light, her phone buzzed with a text from Emma's after-school babysitter, Mrs. Rodriguez. Emma keeps talking to someone named Thomas. She says he's worried about you driving home. Should I be concerned? Sarah's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The light turned green, but she sat frozen as cars behind her began honking. A truck in the next lane swerved suddenly, missing her by inches as it ran the red light she hadn't noticed changing. Her heart hammering, Sarah pulled into the nearest parking lot and called Mrs. Rodriguez. When exactly did Emma mention Thomas being worried about my drive home? She asked. About 20 minutes ago. She was coloring at the kitchen table when she suddenly looked up and said, "Thomas is scared about Mommy's car." I asked her what she meant, but she just said you needed to be extra careful today. 20 minutes ago would have been just before Sarah left the hospital, just before she'd encountered the near miss with the truck. Has she said anything else about Thomas today? She drew a picture of him, Mrs. Rodriguez said. It's quite detailed for a child her age. She says he's 8 years old and that he used to live in your house. Sarah's blood chilled. She said he used to live in our house. Yes, with his family, but something bad happened to them, according to Emma. She seemed sad when she talked about it. After hanging up, Sarah sat in her car for several minutes, trying to rationalize what she'd heard. The timing could be coincidental. The detail about Thomas living in their house was probably just Emma's way of making her imaginary friend seem more real and important. But when she finally arrived home and saw Emma's drawing, her rational explanations crumbled. The picture showed a young boy with brown hair and old-fashioned clothes, knickers, suspenders, and a white shirt with a collar. His face was drawn with remarkable detail for a 6-year-old's artwork, showing not just sad eyes, but a specific expression of worry and protectiveness. Next to him stood a smaller figure that was clearly Emma, and beside her, a taller woman with long dark hair who could only be Sarah, but it was the background that made Sarah's hands shake as she held the paper. Emma had drawn their house with perfect accuracy, including the distinctive bay window in the living room and the specific pattern of the shutters. And in one of the upstairs windows, she'd drawn a shadowy figure watching over them all. "Tell me about your picture, sweetheart," Sarah said, sitting beside Emma at the kitchen table. "That's Thomas." Emma pointed to the boy. "He likes our house because it's where he grew up, but he's sad because his family isn't here anymore." "What happened to his family?" Emma's expression grew somber. "His daddy went away, like mine did, but his mommy, something bad happened to her. Thomas tried to warn her, but she didn't listen in time." The parallel to their own situation was impossible to ignore. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as she studied her daughter's earnest face. "Emma, has Thomas told you anything specific about what might happen to me?" Emma nodded gravely. "He says there's a person who wants to hurt you. Someone who smiles at you but has bad thoughts inside. He's trying to figure out who it is so he can warn you better." That night, Sarah found herself checking and rechecking locks on all the doors and windows. She pulled the curtains tight and made sure the security system was armed. As she moved through the house, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, not malevolently, but protectively, as if some unseen guardian was keeping vigil. In Emma's room, she found her daughter sleeping peacefully, one small hand clutched around the drawing of Thomas. In the moonlight streaming through the window, the boy in the picture seemed almost alive, his eyes following Sarah as she tucked the blanket more securely around Emma's shoulders. "If you're really there," Sarah whispered to the empty room, "please keep her safe." Whatever's happening, please don't let anything happen to her. For just a moment, she could have sworn she felt a gentle breeze touch her face, despite the closed windows. And somewhere in the house, barely audible, came the sound of a child's voice whispering, "I'll try." Chapter 3. The First Evidence. Sarah woke the next morning to the sound of running water. Groggily, she checked her bedside clock, 5:47 a.m. Emma never got up this early, and she'd trained herself to sleep through the night months ago. Padding barefoot down the hallway, Sarah followed the sound to the main bathroom. Water was gushing from the sink faucet at full force, and the basin was overflowing onto the floor. The handle was turned all the way to the left, something that required considerable force to achieve. "Emma," Sarah called out, but there was no response from her daughter's room. She turned off the water and grabbed towels to mop up the flood. The faucet had been working perfectly the night before when she'd brushed her teeth. For it to turn itself on with such force seemed impossible, yet here was the evidence soaking through her bath towels. As she cleaned up the mess, Sarah tried to think of logical explanations. Old plumbing could be unpredictable. Water pressure changes could cause strange behavior in fixtures, but the handle hadn't just loosened, it had been turned completely, requiring deliberate action. By the time Emma woke up at 7, Sarah had convinced herself it was just a quirky old house issue. She made a mental note to call a plumber and went about their morning routine. "How did you sleep, honey?" she asked as Emma climbed onto her booster seat for breakfast. "Good. Thomas stayed with me all night because he was worried." "Worried about what?" Emma tilted her head in that listening pose that was becoming familiar to Sarah. "He says someone was near our house last night. Someone who shouldn't have been here." Sarah's spoon froze halfway to her mouth. "What do you mean, someone was near our house?" Thomas saw them walking around outside. They tried to look in the windows, but Thomas made sure they couldn't see anything important. The logical part of Sarah's mind insisted this was just a continuation of Emma's elaborate fantasy. But another part, the part that had been growing stronger since Thomas first appeared, wondered if her daughter's imaginary friend was somehow picking up on real threats. At the hospital that morning, Sarah found herself distracted and jumpy when Dr. Marcus Webb, the department head, appeared in her peripheral vision. She actually startled audibly. "Sorry, Sarah," he said, raising his hands in mock surrender. "Didn't mean to scare you." Marcus was in his late 40s, with prematurely gray hair and sharp features that could appear either distinguished or severe depending on his mood. He'd been passed over for the chief of pediatric medicine position that Sarah had been offered 3 months ago, a promotion she'd ultimately declined to maintain better work-life balance for Emma's sake. "I'm just tired," Sarah said, forcing a smile. "Long night. Everything okay at home? You seem on edge lately." Before Sarah could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Rodriguez. "Emma insists you need to be careful with medications today. She says Thomas is worried about the wrong medicine. Just thought you should know." Sarah stared at the message, her pulse quickening. She was scheduled to administer several treatments that morning, including a complex medication regimen for a young patient with severe asthma. "Sarah," Marcus was looking at her with concern. "You really do look pale." "I'm fine," she said quickly, pocketing her phone. "Just need some coffee." But as the morning progressed, Emma's warning proved eerily prescient. While preparing a dosage of albuterol for 8-year-old Katie Summers, Sarah reached for what she thought was the correct vial. It wasn't until she was drawing the medication into the syringe that something made her double-check the label. Epinephrine, not albuterol. Her hands began to shake as she realized what had almost happened. Epinephrine in the dosage she'd been preparing would have sent Katie into cardiac arrest. It would have killed her. "Dr. Mitchell?" Nurse Patricia Wong appeared at her elbow. "Is everything all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I almost." Sarah set down the syringe with trembling fingers. "I almost gave Katie epinephrine instead of albuterol." Patricia's eyes widened. She immediately secured both vials and began documenting the near miss. "How did you catch the error?" I'm not sure. Something just made me look again." But Sarah knew exactly what had made her look again. Emma's warning, delivered through her imaginary friend, had quite possibly saved a child's life. During her lunch break, Sarah called Dr. Amanda Foster and moved Emma's appointment up to that afternoon. Whatever was happening, whether psychological, supernatural, or some combination of both, it was affecting her ability to do her job safely. The rest of her shift passed without incident, but Sarah found herself second-guessing every decision, triple-checking every medication, and jumping at every unexpected sound. By the time she picked up Emma from school, she was exhausted and frayed. "How was your day, sweetheart?" she asked as Emma buckled herself into her car seat. "Good. Thomas says you listened to his warning about the medicine. He's proud of you." Sarah's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Emma, I need you to be very honest with me. Is Thomas really just your imagination, or is he something else?" Emma considered this with the seriousness of a judge weighing evidence. "He's not imagination like my stuffed animals, or when I pretend to be a princess. He's different. He's here, but not the same way we're here." "What do you mean?" "He says he used to have a body like ours, but not anymore. Now he's just Thomas, and he stays near our house because that's where his family was, and because he wants to help us not have the same bad things happen." They were stopped at a red light, and Sarah turned to study her daughter's face. Emma looked back at her with those serious blue eyes. No trace of playfulness or deception in her expression. "Has Thomas told you anything else about the person who wants to hurt me?" "He's still trying to figure it out, but he says there's someone you see almost every day. Someone who pretends to care about you but has angry feelings inside." That evening, as Sarah tucked Emma into bed, her daughter reached up and touched her mother's cheek with one small hand. "Don't be scared, Mommy. Thomas is watching out for us. He couldn't save his mommy, but he's not going to let anything happen to you." "What happened to Thomas's mommy, Emma?" Emma's expression grew sad and troubled. A bad person hurt her. Someone who was supposed to be safe, but wasn't. Thomas tried to warn her, but grown-ups don't always listen to children. That's why he talks to me instead, because kids listen better. Long after Emma was asleep, Sarah lay awake staring at the ceiling. The rational, medical part of her mind insisted that everything could be explained by coincidence and a traumatized child's overactive imagination. But the evidence was mounting. The precise timing of the traffic warning, the incredibly specific medication alert, the detailed knowledge of threats that Emma couldn't possibly have access to through normal means. Around midnight, she heard footsteps in the hallway, soft, careful steps that paused outside Emma's door. Sarah held her breath, straining to listen, but the house fell silent again. When she finally drifted off to sleep, her dreams were filled with shadowy figures and the voice of a child calling out warnings that no one would heed. Chapter 4. The Consultation. Dr. Amanda Foster's office was designed to put children at ease, with warm yellow walls, comfortable furniture, and bins of toys and art supplies strategically placed around the room. Emma immediately gravitated toward a basket of colored pencils and began drawing while Sarah explained the situation to Dr. Foster in hushed tones. "The imaginary friend phenomenon isn't uncommon after family disruption," Dr. Foster said, making notes in her leather-bound notebook. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Children often create protective figures to help them process feelings of vulnerability and loss. But the specificity of what she's saying. Sarah glanced at Emma, who was absorbed in her artwork. "She's predicting things that actually happen. Yesterday, she warned me about a medication error that could have been fatal." Dr. Foster's pen paused. "Tell me more about that." Sarah recounted the near miss with the epinephrine, as well as the traffic incident and the mysterious flooding in their bathroom. As she spoke, she could see the psychologist's expression shifting from routine professional interest to something more focused and concerned. "Emma," Dr. Foster said gently, "would you like to tell me about your friend Thomas?" Emma looked up from her drawing, another detailed portrait of the brown-haired boy in old-fashioned clothes. "He doesn't like to talk to grown-ups he doesn't know." "Why is that?" "Because most grown-ups don't believe in him. And when people don't believe, It makes it harder for him to help. Dr. Foster moved closer to Emma's chair. What kind of help does Thomas give you? He watches out for me and Mommy. He tells me when there's danger, so I can tell her, like yesterday with the wrong medicine. How does Thomas know about these dangers? Emma paused in her coloring, considering the question carefully. He says he can see things that are going to happen because he doesn't have a body to get in the way. And he remembers what it was like when bad things happened to his family, so he knows what to look for. Sarah felt a chill run through her. Emma's explanation was far too sophisticated for a 6-year-old's typical fantasy narrative. Emma, has Thomas told you anything about his family? His daddy left when he was 8, just like mine did when I was 6. And his mommy tried to take care of him by herself, just like you do for me. But someone hurt his mommy because she was alone and couldn't protect herself. Dr. Foster and Sarah exchanged glances. The parallels to their current situation were impossible to ignore. Can you ask Thomas to tell you more about the person who hurt his mommy? Dr. Foster asked. Emma tilted her head in that listening pose, then nodded. He says it was someone who seemed nice at first. Someone who helped his mommy sometimes and made her feel safe. But really they wanted to hurt her because... She frowned, concentrating. Because she had something they wanted. Or because she didn't love them the way they wanted her to. The room fell silent except for the scratch of Emma's pencil on paper. Sarah felt her heart rate accelerating as the implications of her daughter's words sank in. I'd like to speak with your mother privately for a moment, Dr. Foster said to Emma. Would you be okay drawing out here in the waiting room? My assistant, Mrs. Chun, has some special markers you might like to try. After Emma was settled with the receptionist, Dr. Foster closed her office door and turned to Sarah with a grave expression. I have to ask you this directly. Is there anyone in your life who might pose a genuine threat? An ex-boyfriend, a colleague with romantic interest you haven't reciprocated? Anyone who might feel entitled to a relationship with you? Sarah thought carefully. I haven't dated anyone since the separation. David and I have an amicable relationship for Emma's sake. My colleagues are all professional. I mean, there's no one I can think of who would. What about the promotion you mentioned? The department head position you turned down? Did anyone else want that job? Marcus Webb was the other candidate. He seemed disappointed, but he congratulated me and said he understood my decision when I declined. I'm probably reading too much into normal workplace dynamics, she said. Marcus is a good doctor and a decent person. Sarah, I'm going to suggest something that might sound extreme, but I think we need to consider the possibility that Emma is picking up on real threats through heightened intuition rather than supernatural communication. What do you mean? Children are incredibly perceptive. They notice body language, vocal tones, and behavioral patterns that adults often miss because we're distracted by social conventions. Emma may be processing genuine danger signals and translating them through the framework of her imaginary friend because that's the only way her 6-year-old mind can make sense of complex adult threats. Before Sarah could respond, there was a crash from the waiting room. They rushed out to find Emma standing in the middle of scattered books and papers, tears streaming down her face. What happened? Sarah knelt beside her daughter. Thomas was really mad, Emma sobbed. He said the doctor was trying to make him go away, and that would leave us unprotected. He knocked the books down to show he's real. Mrs. Chun, the elderly receptionist, looked shaken. I was right here, she said. No one touched those books. They just fell, all at once. Dr. Foster surveyed the mess. At least 20 books that had been neatly arranged on a shelf, now scattered across the floor in a perfect circle around Emma's chair. I think, she said slowly, we need to approach this from a different angle. Instead of trying to eliminate Thomas, perhaps we should work with him. She knelt down to Emma's level. Can you ask Thomas if he would be willing to give us more specific information about the danger he sees? If he really wants to protect your mommy, then helping us understand the threat better would be the best way to do that. Emma wiped her eyes and nodded, then closed them briefly as if listening to an internal voice. He says the person is someone mommy trusts. Someone who has been watching her for a long time and waiting for the right moment. He says. Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. He says they have keys to our house. Sarah's blood turned to ice. Keys to our house. Emma, are you sure that's what Thomas said? Emma nodded solemnly. He says to check the locks tonight and every night, and to be very careful who you trust, even people who seem safe. As they drove home, Sarah's mind raced. The locksmith who had changed their locks after David moved out had seemed professional and trustworthy. But anyone could make copies of keys. Anyone with access to her purse, her desk at work, or her home could have duplicated them. That evening, she called a different locksmith and scheduled an emergency lock change for the following day. She also installed a chain lock on the front door and checked every window in the house to ensure they were secure. But as she moved through her nightly routine, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that changing the locks might be too little, too late. If Emma, or Thomas, was right, then someone had already been inside their home. Someone who knew their routines, their vulnerabilities, and their fears. Someone who was just waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Chapter 5, Investigation. Sarah spent her lunch break the next day poring over hospital incident reports from the past 3 months. What she found made her stomach clench with growing dread. There had been 17 near-miss incidents involving her patients, an unusually high number that she'd attributed to stress and the adjustment period following her promotion offer. But now, looking at the pattern with fresh eyes, she saw something more sinister. Equipment failures that occurred just before she was scheduled to use them. Medication mix-ups that happened specifically with drugs she'd ordered. Computer glitches that affected only her patient files. Each incident, viewed individually, could be explained as random hospital mishaps. Together, they painted a picture of systematic sabotage. Sarah printed out the reports and spread them across her desk, looking for connections. The incidents had started in earnest about 6 weeks ago, roughly 2 weeks after she declined the department head position. They were subtle enough to seem like accidents, but frequent enough to create a pattern of doubt about her competence. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Rodriguez. Emma says Thomas is very worried today. She won't stop asking when you're coming home. Sarah checked her watch. It was only 1:30 p.m., and she wasn't scheduled to leave until 5 o'clock. But something about the message made her uneasy. She was gathering up the incident reports when Dr. Webb appeared in her doorway. "Working through lunch again?" he asked, his tone friendly, but his eyes scanning the papers on her desk. "That's not healthy, Sarah." "Just catching up on some paperwork," she said, casually sliding the reports into a folder. Marcus stepped into her office and closed the door behind him. "I want to talk to you about the Morrison case. Your treatment protocol was unconventional." Sarah frowned. The Morrison case, a 10-year-old with severe asthma, had been successfully treated and discharged 2 days ago. Her protocol had been textbook standard. "I'm not sure what you mean," she said. "The dosage calculations were off. If Nurse Wong hadn't caught the error, we could have had a serious problem." Sarah's pulse quickened. She remembered the Morrison case clearly. She triple-checked everything after the near miss with Katie Summers. There had been no errors. "Marcus, I reviewed my notes twice. The dosages were correct." "I have the original prescription right here," he said, pulling a paper from his jacket pocket. "See, you prescribed 0.5 milligrams when the correct dose for a child Morrison's weight should have been 0.05 milligrams. 10 times too much." Sarah stared at the prescription. It was her handwriting, her signature, but she had no memory of writing those numbers. I didn't write this." "Sarah, I'm concerned about you. The stress of single parenthood, the recent changes in your personal life. It's affecting your judgment. Maybe you should consider taking some time off." "I don't need time off. I need to understand how my prescription was altered after I wrote it." Marcus's expression hardened slightly. "That's a serious accusation. Are you suggesting someone in this hospital is tampering with medical records?" "I'm suggesting that someone wants me to look incompetent." The words hung in the air between them. Marcus studied her face for a long moment, then sighed. I think you're under more stress than you realize. Why don't you go home early today? Spend some time with Emma. Clear your head." It wasn't really a suggestion, and they both knew it. As Sarah drove home, her mind raced through the implications. If Marcus was behind the sabotage, confronting him directly had been a mistake. If he wasn't, then she just made herself look paranoid and unstable to her department head. But when she walked into her house and saw Emma's face light up with relief, she knew she'd made the right choice. "Mommy, Thomas said you were in danger at work today. He said someone with a hurt hand was lying to you." Sarah's breath caught. Marcus had a distinctive scar on his left hand from a scalpel accident during his residency. She'd never mentioned it to Emma, and there was no way her daughter could know about it. "What else did Thomas tell you about this person?" Emma led her to the kitchen table, where she'd been drawing. The latest picture showed a man in a white coat with dark hair and angry eyes. In his scarred left hand, he held what looked like a piece of paper with writing on it. "He says this person wants your job and wants to live in our house with us, but not because he loves us, because he wants to own us like toys." Sarah sank into a chair, staring at her daughter's disturbingly accurate artwork. "Emma, has Thomas told you anything else about what this person might do?" "He's going to try to make people think you're sick in your head. Then he'll offer to take care of us, and people will think he's being nice. But really he just wants to control everything." The scenario Emma described was chillingly plausible. If Marcus could document enough incidents to suggest Sarah was having a breakdown, he could petition for her to be removed from her position. And if he positioned himself as the caring colleague willing to help a struggling single mother. "Thomas says we need to be very careful tonight," Emma continued. "The angry man knows you're starting to figure things out, and that makes him more dangerous." Sarah spent the evening installing additional security measures, door alarms, window sensors, and a motion-activated camera for the backyard. She also made copies of all the incident reports and stored them in a safety deposit box, along with a detailed account of her suspicions about Marcus. But as she tucked Emma into bed, her daughter's next words made her blood run cold. "Mommy, Thomas says the man already has keys to our house. He made copies before you changed the locks." "How is that possible?" "He came here when we were at the grocery store last weekend. Thomas tried to stop him, but he can't touch things the way living people can. He could only watch." Sarah's mind flashed back to the previous Saturday. They'd gone to the store for about an hour, leaving through the front door. When they returned, everything had seemed normal. But if someone had been inside their house, she spent the night checking and rechecking every lock, every window, every possible entry point. And in the morning, she found evidence that chilled her to the bone. On the kitchen counter, exactly where she always left her keys, was a small pile of metal shavings, the kind left behind when duplicating a key. Thomas, it seemed, was trying to leave her proof, and that meant Emma's imaginary friend was far more real than Sarah had ever dared to believe. Chapter 6, Paranoia. The metal shavings changed everything. Sarah stared at the tiny curls of brass and steel scattered across her granite countertop, physical evidence that someone had been in her home, handling her keys, violating their most private space. She carefully collected the shavings in a plastic bag, then called in sick to work. There was no way she could focus on patients when her home had been compromised and her daughter was in potential danger. "We're going to stay somewhere else for a few days," she told Emma over breakfast. "Maybe Grandma's house." Emma shook her head firmly. "Thomas says we can't leave. If we go away, the bad person will do something to our house that will make it dangerous when we come back." "What kind of something?" Emma's expression grew troubled as she listened to her invisible companion. He says the person might hurt our house, so it would catch fire or fill up with poison gas. Thomas says his mommy tried to go away once, but the bad person made her come back by threatening to destroy everything she cared about." Sarah felt trapped between rational skepticism and the mounting evidence that Emma's warnings had been accurate so far. Every maternal instinct screamed at her to get Emma to safety. But what if leaving really would make things worse? Instead, she spent the morning turning their home into a fortress. She had a security company install a comprehensive alarm system with cameras covering every entrance. She bought motion sensors for each room and a panic button for both herself and Emma to wear around their necks. But as the day progressed, Sarah found herself jumping at every sound, analyzing every interaction for hidden meanings. When the grocery delivery arrived, she scrutinized the driver's face, wondering if he could be working with Marcus. When a neighbor waved from across the street, she wondered if they'd been asked to keep watch on her movements. The paranoia was exhausting, but Emma's next revelation made it seem justified. Thomas says the angry man came to our house again last night, Emma reported after her afternoon nap. But this time he couldn't get in because of the new alarms. He got very mad and threw something at our back door. Sarah rushed to check the door and found fresh scratches in the wood around the lock, as if someone had tried to force entry with a screwdriver or similar tool. The motion sensor camera for the backyard had been triggered at 2:17 a.m., but when she reviewed the footage, she saw only shadows and movement at the edge of the frame. That evening, her phone rang. The caller ID showed the hospital's main number. "Sarah, it's Marcus. I wanted to check on you. You seemed very upset yesterday." His voice was warm and concerned, but Sarah found herself analyzing every word for hidden threats. "I'm fine. Just needed a day to rest. I've been thinking about our conversation. Maybe I was too harsh about the Morrison case. We all make mistakes, especially when we're under stress." The about-face was jarring. Yesterday, he'd been documenting her errors. Now he was offering forgiveness? "I appreciate that, Marcus. I was wondering if you'd like me to come by this evening. I could bring dinner, spend some time with Emma. I know how hard it must be, raising her alone." Every alarm bell in Sarah's head started ringing. "That's very kind, but we're fine." "Are you sure? I worry about you, Sarah. Both of you." The way he said "both of you" made Sarah's skin crawl. There was something possessive in his tone, something that suggested he considered them his responsibility rather than his colleague's family. "We're perfectly fine," she said firmly. "I'll see you at work tomorrow." After hanging up, Sarah found Emma in her room, drawing another picture of Thomas. But this one was different. The boy's expression was urgent, almost panicked. "Thomas is very scared," Emma said without looking up. "He says the angry man is getting ready to do something bad very soon. Maybe tonight." "What kind of something?" "He's not sure. But Thomas remembers this feeling from when his mommy was in danger. He says it's like the air before a big storm. Everything gets very quiet and then very dangerous." Sarah made a decision. She called Detective Martinez at the local police station, a contact she'd established during her residency when she treated several children from domestic violence situations. "Detective, this is Dr. Sarah Mitchell. I need to report a potential stalking situation." Martinez listened to her account with professional attention, but she could hear the skepticism in his voice when she mentioned Emma's predictions. "Dr. Mitchell, do you have any direct evidence that Dr. Webb has threatened you or your daughter?" "The key shavings, the scratches on my door, the pattern of sabotage at work. All circumstantial. And the information about the key duplication. You said your 6-year-old daughter told you about it." Sarah realized how it sounded. A stressed single mother, claiming her child's imaginary friend was providing intelligence about a stalker. "Look, I'll increase patrol frequency in your neighborhood for the next few nights," Martinez said. "But unless you have concrete evidence or witness a direct threat, there's not much more I can do." After hanging up, Sarah felt more alone than ever. The police thought she was paranoid. Her colleagues would side with Marcus if she made accusations, and her only source of accurate information was the 6-year-old's conversations with a dead child. As darkness fell, Sarah armed the security system and settled in for what she suspected would be a very long night. Emma had fallen asleep on the living room couch while watching a movie, and Sarah didn't have the heart to move her. Instead, she covered her daughter with a blanket and positioned herself in a chair where she could watch both the front and back entrances. At 11:43 p.m., the motion sensor in the backyard triggered. Sarah's phone buzzed with an alert from the security company. Motion detected in Zone 3 backyard. She pulled up the camera feed on her tablet and saw a figure moving along the fence line. The person was wearing dark clothing and a hood, making identification impossible, but their movements were deliberate and familiar with the property layout. Sarah's finger hovered over the panic button, but something made her wait. The figure approached the back door and knelt down, apparently working on the lock. But instead of trying to break in, they seemed to be installing something. After several minutes, the figure retreated back across the yard and disappeared into the neighbor's property. Sarah waited another hour before carefully disarming the alarm and checking the back door. Attached to the door frame, barely visible in the darkness, was a small electronic device. Sarah recognized it from her research into home security. It was a listening device designed to pick up conversations from inside the house. Now she had proof. Someone was surveilling them, monitoring their private conversations, gathering intelligence for some unknown purpose. But as she held the tiny device in her palm, Sarah realized the most terrifying aspect of the situation. Whoever was doing this was patient, methodical, and far more dangerous than a simple workplace rivalry or romantic obsession. This was someone who planned to take everything she had, piece by piece, until she had no choice but to surrender to their will. And according to Emma's increasingly urgent warnings, they were running out of time to stop him. Chapter 7. The Confrontation. Sarah spent the morning documenting everything, photographing the listening device, printing screenshots of the motion sensor alerts, and compiling a detailed timeline of incidents. The evidence was circumstantial but compelling, and she hoped it would be enough to convince Detective Martinez to take action. But first, she needed to confront Marcus directly. If he was innocent, her accusations would end their professional relationship, but might shake loose information about who was really stalking her. If he was guilty, her confrontation might force him into making a mistake that would provide concrete evidence. She dropped Emma at school with strict instructions to stay with her teacher at all times and to call immediately if anyone tried to take her home early. Then she drove to the hospital with grim determination. Marcus was in his office, reviewing patient charts. When Sarah knocked on his door frame, he looked up with a smile that seemed genuine. "Sarah, you look better today. I was worried about you yesterday." "We need to talk," she said, stepping into his office and closing the door behind her. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Sarah placed the listening device on his desk. Marcus stared at it for a moment, then looked up at her with what appeared to be genuine confusion. "What is this?" "A surveillance device. I found it attached to my back door this morning." Marcus picked up the device, examining it carefully. Sarah, this is serious. Have you called the police?" "I'm calling them after we talk." "Marcus, I need to ask you directly. Have you been watching my house? Following me? Interfering with my patient care?" The color drained from Marcus's face. "What? Sarah, no. Why would you think that?" "The incidents with my patients, the altered prescriptions, your sudden interest in my personal life. The prescription errors are documented fact, not sabotage. And I'm concerned about a colleague who's clearly under tremendous stress. That's what friends do." Sarah studied his face, looking for signs of deception. Marcus appeared genuinely shocked and hurt by her accusations, but she'd learned not to trust appearances. "Someone has keys to my house. Someone who knew about your scar before I ever mentioned it to anyone." Marcus held up his left hand, displaying the thin white line across his palm. Sarah, dozens of people know about this. It's not exactly a secret. Someone with medical knowledge has been sabotaging my work systematically. Someone who wants me to appear incompetent so they can step in and help me. If someone is sabotaging you, it's not me. But Sarah, listen to yourself. You sound paranoid, unstable. Is that what you're going to put in your report? Marcus leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting from confusion to concern. What report? Sarah, I'm not reporting anything. I'm trying to understand why my colleague and friend thinks I'm some kind of predator. Before Sarah could respond, her phone rang. The caller ID showed Emma's school. Mrs. Mitchell? This is Principal Johnson. I'm calling because a man came to the school this morning claiming to be Emma's uncle. He said there was a family emergency and he needed to pick her up immediately. Sarah's heart stopped. Did you let him take her? No, of course not. He wasn't on our authorized pickup list, but he seemed very upset when we refused, and he knew specific details about Emma's schedule and friends. I thought you should know. What did he look like? Middle-aged, dark hair, medium build. He had a scar on his left hand that he kept touching when he got agitated. Sarah's eyes locked with Marcus's across the desk. His face had gone white, and she saw the exact moment when understanding dawned. Marcus, she said slowly. Where were you an hour ago? Here, in surgery. You can check the logs. Sarah believed him, but if Marcus wasn't the stalker, then someone was using his physical characteristics to frame him. Someone who knew about the scar, who had access to medical knowledge, who could alter prescriptions and create false evidence. Principal Johnson, I'm coming to get Emma right now. Don't let anyone take her, regardless of what they claim. After hanging up, Sarah stared at Marcus with growing horror. Someone's trying to frame you. They're using your appearance, your medical knowledge, your access to the hospital. Who would do that? Someone who benefits from both of us being discredited. Someone who wants me to look paranoid and you to look like a predator. The realization hit them both simultaneously. There was a third party orchestrating everything. Someone with intimate knowledge of their professional relationship, their personal vulnerabilities, and their daily routines. We need to get to Emma, Marcus said, standing up. If someone tried to take her once, they'll try again. As they hurried toward the parking garage, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stop digging or your daughter pays the price. This is your only warning. Sarah showed the message to Marcus, whose face darkened with anger. Whoever this is, they just made a fatal mistake, he said. Threatening a child crosses every line. We're going to catch them, Sarah. And when we do, they're going to regret ever coming near you and Emma. But as they reached their cars, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were already too late. The stalker had escalated from surveillance to attempted kidnapping, which meant they were entering the most dangerous phase of the game. And somewhere in the city, Emma was sitting in a classroom, protected only by school security and the warnings of a dead child who might or might not be able to keep her safe. Chapter 8, Disappearance. Sarah and Marcus arrived at Emma's school within minutes of each other, both vehicles screeching into the parking lot with barely controlled panic. Principal Johnson met them at the main entrance, her face grave. Emma's fine, she said immediately, seeing Sarah's pale complexion. She's in my office with counselor. But Dr. Mitchell, we need to talk about what happened this morning. They were led to a small conference room where Principal Johnson spread out security footage screenshots on the table. The man who tried to pick up Emma arrived at 9:15 a.m., she explained. He had a fake ID with the name David Mitchell, Emma's father's name, but a different photo. When our secretary asked for additional verification, he became agitated and left quickly. Sarah examined the grainy security images. The man's face was partially obscured by a baseball cap, but his build and general appearance were indeed similar to Marcus's. The scar on his left hand was clearly visible in one frame. This is sophisticated, Marcus said, studying the photos. Someone's gone to considerable trouble to make themselves look like me. Or to make security footage look like you, Sarah added. The angle, the lighting, the partial concealment. It's almost like they knew exactly where the cameras were. Principal Johnson nodded. That's what concerned us most. This person seemed very familiar with our security setup. Sarah's phone rang. Detective Martinez returning her earlier call. Dr. Mitchell, I got your message about the listening device. I can meet you at the station this afternoon to take a formal statement. Detective, someone just tried to kidnap my daughter from school using a fake ID. This has escalated beyond stalking. The tone of Martinez's voice shifted immediately. Is your daughter safe now? Yes, but barely. The school stopped them, but they'll try again. I'm sending units to the school and your home address immediately. Don't go anywhere alone. and keep your daughter with you at all times." After hanging up, Sarah went to collect Emma from the principal's office. She found her daughter sitting quietly with the school counselor, drawing another picture of Thomas. "Mommy." Emma ran into her arms. "Thomas said you were coming. He was very worried about the bad man who tried to take me." "Are you okay, sweetheart? You weren't scared?" Emma shook her head. "Thomas told me not to go with the man, even though he knew things about our family. Thomas said he was wearing a mask to look like someone else." Sarah's breath caught. "A mask, not a real mask. Thomas says it's like when actors change their faces for movies. The man made himself look different so people would blame the wrong person." Marcus, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped forward. "Emma, did Thomas tell you anything else about this man?" Emma studied Marcus carefully, then nodded. "Thomas says you're not the bad person. The bad person wants everyone to think you are, but you have different feelings inside. The bad person's feelings are all twisted and angry, but yours are scared and worried, like Mommy's." The three adults exchanged glances. Emma's assessment aligned perfectly with their own deductions, but how could a 6-year-old, even one with an unusually perceptive imaginary friend, understand such complex deception? On the drive home, with Marcus following in his own car for security, Emma provided more disturbing details. "Thomas says the bad person has been planning this for a very long time, since before we moved to our house. They picked our house because of what happened to Thomas's family." "What do you mean, picked our house?" "The bad person knew about Thomas and his mommy. They wanted to do the same thing again, like a game they enjoyed playing before." Sarah's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Emma, are you saying this person killed Thomas's mother?" Emma nodded solemnly. "And now they want to do it again. But Thomas won't let them. He's stronger now because he's learned how to protect people better." When they arrived home, Sarah was surprised to find Detective Martinez already waiting in the driveway with 2 patrol officers. He approached her car with professional efficiency. "Dr. Mitchell, we need to get you and your daughter somewhere safe while we investigate this situation properly." "I'm not leaving my house," Sarah said firmly. "If we run, this person wins. They get to control our lives through fear." "Ma'am, with respect, someone just attempted to kidnap your child. This is beyond home security measures." Marcus joined the conversation. "Detective, what if we set up surveillance here? Use the house as bait while keeping Emma protected." Martinez considered this. "It's risky, but if this person is as obsessed as Dr. Mitchell believes, they'll likely attempt to approach the house again soon." They spent the afternoon installing additional security measures and briefing the surveillance team. Emma seemed to take it all in stride, chattering with the officers and showing them her drawings of Thomas. But as evening approached, Emma became increasingly agitated. "Thomas is very upset," she told Sarah. "He says the bad person is coming tonight, and they're angrier than before. He says," Emma's voice dropped to a whisper, "he says they're not planning to wait anymore. They're going to try to take us both." Sarah felt ice form in her stomach. "Take us both? What do you mean?" "Thomas says the bad person wants to hurt you first, then take me away to be their little girl instead, like a doll they can dress up and control." That night, as surveillance teams took their positions and every security system was armed, Sarah held Emma close and wondered if they'd made a terrible mistake by staying in the house. At 10:47 p.m., the first motion sensors triggered. At 10:52 p.m., the power went out. At 10:55 p.m., Sarah realized that Emma was no longer in her arms, and in the darkness, she heard her daughter's voice calling out, "Mommy, Thomas says to hide. The bad person is already inside." Chapter 9, Revelations. The house plunged into complete darkness as the backup generator failed to kick in. Sarah's heart hammered as she felt around the bed where Emma had been sleeping just moments before. "Emma," she whispered urgently. "I'm here, Mommy," came Emma's voice from across the room. "Thomas told me to hide in the closet when the lights went out." Sarah crawled toward the sound of her daughter's voice, her hands shaking as she navigated the familiar bedroom in pitch blackness. The surveillance team should have responded to the power outage immediately, but she heard no movement from outside, no radio chatter, no signs of the officers who were supposed to be protecting them. She found Emma huddled in the back corner of the walk-in closet, clutching her drawing of Thomas. "Sweetheart, we need to get out of the house," Sarah whispered. Emma shook her head firmly. "Thomas says no. He says the bad person cut the power and did something to the policeman outside. If we try to leave, they'll catch us." As if to confirm Emma's warning, Sarah heard the soft creak of footsteps on the stairs. Someone was in their house, moving slowly and deliberately through the darkness. Sarah pulled out her cell phone, but there was no signal. Whoever had cut the power had also found a way to block their communications. The footsteps paused outside their bedroom door. "Dr. Sarah Mitchell?" The voice was unfamiliar. Neither Marcus nor anyone else she could identify. It was electronically distorted, as if the speaker was using a voice modulator. "I know you're in here. There's no point in hiding." Sarah pressed her hand over Emma's mouth and pulled her deeper into the closet, behind a row of hanging clothes. "I've been watching you for months," the voice continued, closer now. "Learning your routines, your fears, your weaknesses. You're much more interesting than Julie Thompson was. She broke too easily." Sarah's blood chilled. Julie Thompson, Thomas's mother. This person was admitting to her murder. "Emma, sweetheart, where are you?" The distorted voice called out in a sing-song tone. "I have something special planned for you. We're to go on a long trip together, just you and me." Emma trembled against Sarah's side, but her voice was barely audible as she whispered, "Thomas says the person is wearing a mask and special clothes to change how they look. He says they've done this before, many times." The bedroom door opened with a soft click. "I know you're hiding in here," the intruder said. "The thermal imaging shows 2 heat signatures. There's nowhere to go, Sarah. Just like there was nowhere for Julie to go." Sarah heard drawers being opened, furniture being moved. The search was methodical and patient. Emma tugged on her mother's sleeve and pointed toward the back wall of the closet. In the darkness, Sarah could barely make out what her daughter was indicating. A small access panel she'd never noticed before. "Thomas showed me." Emma breathed in her ear. "It goes to the space between the walls. His daddy built it when Thomas was little, for hide and seek." With infinite care, Sarah worked the panel open. It was just large enough for them to crawl through into a narrow space that ran along the interior wall of the house. The space was musty and cramped, but it provided concealment and, potentially, an escape route. They had just pulled the panel closed behind them when they heard the closet door slide open. "Clever," the distorted voice said, "but I can hear you breathing. This house has many secrets, but I've had months to explore them all." Through gaps in the wall panels, Sarah could see light moving around the bedroom, a powerful flashlight in the hands of a figure dressed entirely in black, including a ski mask and what appeared to be padding designed to alter their body shape. Emma pressed something into Sarah's hand, one of her drawings. But this wasn't a picture of Thomas. It was a detailed floor plan of their house, showing passages and spaces that Sarah had never known existed. "Thomas drew this for me," Emma whispered so quietly Sarah could barely hear her. "He says there's a way out through the basement, but we have to be very quiet." They began crawling through the narrow space between the walls, following the route marked on Emma's drawing. Behind them, they could hear the intruder systematically searching the room, growing more frustrated with each passing minute. "You're only delaying the inevitable," the voice called out. "I have all night, and I've disabled all your security systems. The police won't be coming to help you." As they reached a vertical shaft that led down toward the basement, Sarah heard something that made her blood freeze. The sound of multiple voices. The intruder wasn't alone. "Any sign of them?" asked a second voice, undisguised and disturbingly familiar. "They're in the walls somewhere," replied the first voice, removing the electronic distortion. "But we'll find them. We always do." Sarah recognized that voice now. It belonged to Dr. Jennifer Hayes, her colleague and supposed friend. But the second voice was what truly shocked her. It was Detective Martinez. Emma had been right all along. The threat wasn't from one obsessed individual. but from a conspiracy involving people Sarah had trusted completely. People who had used their positions of authority to isolate and terrorize her, just as they had done to Julie Thompson, and who knew how many others. As they descended through the shaft toward what they hoped would be freedom, Sarah realized that Emma's imaginary friend had been their only reliable source of truth in a world where everyone else was lying. And now, trapped in the walls of their own home, with killers hunting them through the darkness, Thomas might be their only hope of survival. Chapter 10. The Truth About Thomas. In the narrow crawlspace beneath the house, Sarah and Emma huddled together while footsteps pounded overhead. Sarah's mind reeled from the revelation that Jennifer and Martinez were working together, hunting them through their own home, like predators stalking prey. How is this possible? Sarah whispered, "Jennifer's been my friend for years. Martinez is a police detective." Emma's voice was calm despite their terrifying situation. "Thomas says some people are very good at pretending to be nice. They practice for a long time until everyone believes their lies." Through the heating vents, they could hear Jennifer's voice, no longer disguised. "Check the basement again. They have to be down here somewhere." "The thermal imaging is picking up residual heat signatures throughout the house," Martinez replied. "They could be anywhere in these walls." Sarah looked at Emma's drawing again, using her phone's dim light. The floor plan showed a tunnel leading from beneath the house to what appeared to be the old root cellar in the backyard, a structure Sarah had assumed was just a decorative garden feature. "Emma, how did Thomas know about all these hidden spaces?" "He explored them when he was alive," Emma explained. "His daddy was scared of bad people too, so he built secret places to hide, but the bad people found his mommy anyway." As they crawled through the tunnel, Emma continued Thomas's story. "Thomas says these same people killed his mommy 5 years ago. They pretended to be helping her, but really they were playing a game. They liked scaring her and making her feel helpless before they hurt her." Sarah's stomach lurched. "A game? Thomas says they do it to mommies who live alone with their children. They pick houses that already have hiding places because it makes the game more fun for them." The tunnel opened into the old root cellar, its stone walls damp and musty. Sarah pushed open the heavy wooden door and they emerged into the backyard, grateful for the cool night air. But their relief was short-lived. Flashlight beams immediately pinned them in place. "There they are," Martinez called out. Jennifer and Martinez approached from different directions, cutting off any escape routes. In the flashlight glare, Sarah could see Jennifer's face clearly for the first time. The warm, caring expression she'd always worn was gone, replaced by something cold and predatory. "Hello, Sarah," Jennifer said conversationally. "I have to admit, you've made this much more interesting than Julie Thompson did. She just cowered in her bedroom until we found her." "Why?" Sarah asked, pulling Emma behind her. "Why are you doing this?" "Because we can," Martinez answered. "Because people like you think you're so smart, so capable, so independent. But when you're really scared, when you're really helpless, you're just like everyone else." Jennifer smiled. "We've been perfecting our technique for years. Divorced mothers, widows, women who think they don't need protection. We show them how wrong they are. And then what? You kill them." "Eventually," Jennifer said, "but not until they beg us to save them. Not until they admit they were foolish to think they could survive on their own." Emma stepped out from behind Sarah, her small face set with determination. "You can't hurt us," she said clearly. "Thomas won't let you." Jennifer laughed. "Oh, sweetheart, Thomas is dead. Dead people can't help anyone." "You're wrong," Emma replied. "Thomas helped his mommy as much as he could, and he's been getting stronger ever since, learning how to protect people better." As she spoke, the temperature around them began to drop noticeably. Sarah's breath became visible in the suddenly frigid air, and the flashlight beams began to flicker. "What the hell?" Martinez started to say, but his words were cut off as his flashlight died completely. Jennifer's light failed a moment later, plunging them into darkness. In the blackness, Sarah heard Emma's voice, calm and confident. "Thomas says to run to the street now, Mommy. He's going to keep them busy. Sarah grabbed Emma's hand, and they ran toward the front of the house. Behind them, she heard Jennifer and Martinez shouting in confusion and anger, their voices mixing with sounds she couldn't explain, crashes, bangs, and what sounded like objects flying through the air. They reached the street to find the surveillance vehicles empty, their occupants nowhere to be seen. Sarah realized that Martinez must have sent the other officers away, or somehow incapacitated them. Using a neighbor's phone, Sarah called 911 and requested backup, specifically asking for officers from a different precinct than Martinez's. Then she and Emma waited on the front lawn, watching their house. "Is Thomas okay?" Sarah asked Emma. Emma nodded. "He's tired from helping us, but he's happy. He says he finally got to protect someone the way he couldn't protect his mommy." 20 minutes later, legitimate police officers arrived and entered the house. They found Jennifer and Martinez in the backyard, both unconscious and suffering from what appeared to be multiple impacts from blunt objects. The backyard was littered with garden tools, patio furniture, and decorative stones that seemed to have been hurled through the air with considerable force. Neither Jennifer nor Martinez could explain what had happened to them, claiming only that they had been attacked by invisible forces. As the paramedics loaded them into ambulances, Sarah held Emma close and whispered a quiet thank you to the night air. For the first time since Thomas had entered their lives, Emma smiled without worry or fear. "He says you're welcome, Mommy, and he says he can rest now, because his job is finally finished." Chapter 11, Patterns of the Past. The investigation that followed Jennifer and Martinez's arrest revealed the full scope of their crimes. Detective Lisa Chun from the state police led the inquiry, and what she uncovered painted a horrifying picture of systematic predation spanning nearly a decade. They call themselves the Shepherds. Detective Chun explained to Sarah during one of several debriefing sessions. Their method was to identify vulnerable single mothers, then insert themselves into their lives as protectors, while simultaneously orchestrating the very threats they claimed to be guarding against. Sarah sat in the police station's victim services room, Emma coloring quietly at a nearby table while they talked. The little girl seemed remarkably resilient, though she occasionally paused in her artwork to tilt her head, as if listening to something only she could hear. "How many victims were there?" 12 that we can confirm, possibly more. Julie Thompson was the third victim. They refined their techniques with each case, becoming more sophisticated in their manipulation and evidence tampering. Detective Chin opened a thick file folder. Jennifer Hayes was the constant in every case. She would befriend the target, often through professional connections, and gain their trust over months or even years. Martinez provided the law enforcement cover, making sure investigations were misdirected and evidence disappeared. "But Jennifer was my friend," Sarah said, still struggling to reconcile the woman she'd known with the predator who had hunted her through her own home. "We worked together for years before any of this started." According to her confession, she'd been watching you for 3 years, waiting for the right opportunity. Your divorce provided the vulnerability she needed. She recommended your house to you through a mutual acquaintance, knowing its history and hidden passages. Emma looked up from her drawing. "Thomas says she picked our house because it was like a puzzle for her to solve. She wanted to see if she could do what happened to his mommy, but better." Detective Chin glanced at Emma with interest. Throughout the investigation, the child's statements about Thomas had proven remarkably accurate. When pressed, Emma had provided details about the Thompson murders that hadn't been released to the public, information that helped police connect evidence from the cold case to Jennifer and Martinez's recent crimes. "Emma, has Thomas told you anything else about what happened to his family?" Emma set down her crayon and considered the question seriously. "He says his mommy tried very hard to protect him, but the bad people were smarter than she was. They made her think she was going crazy by moving things in the house and making scary sounds at night. That matches the pattern we've identified," Detective Chin confirmed to Sarah. "They would gaslight their victims for months, undermining their confidence and isolating them from support systems. Thomas says they would pretend to help while making things worse," Emma continued. like giving medicine that made people sicker instead of better. Sarah's blood chilled as she remembered Jennifer's medical advice over the years, the medications she'd recommended, the treatments she'd suggested. How many of Sarah's health issues might have been artificially induced? We're having all of Jennifer's cases reviewed by an independent medical board, Detective Chin said, reading Sarah's expression. There's evidence she may have been poisoning some of her victims slowly, creating symptoms that would support a narrative of declining mental health. Emma nodded gravely. Thomas says his mommy got very sick before she died. The bad people gave her things that made her scared and confused, so when she tried to tell people about the danger, no one believed her. The parallels to Sarah's own experience were undeniable. The medication errors, the incidents at work, the growing sense of paranoia and isolation, all of it had been carefully orchestrated to undermine her credibility and mental stability. How did they choose their victims? Sarah asked. Professional women, usually in healthcare or education, recently divorced or widowed. Children in the household were preferred. It gave them additional leverage and control mechanisms. Detective Chin pulled out a map marked with red pins. They worked in a roughly 50-mile radius, never hitting the same area twice in succession. Julie Thompson's murder was in this house 5 years ago. They waited, let the property change hands several times, then guided you to purchase it. But why come back to the same house? Emma answered before Detective Chin could respond. Because Thomas was here. They wanted to see if they could win against him this time. It was like a challenge for them. Detective Chin looked skeptical. Emma, I know you believe Thomas helped you, but he did help us. Emma interrupted with unusual firmness. He couldn't save his mommy because he was just a little boy and didn't understand how to fight bad people yet. But he learned how to be stronger after he died. He learned how to move things and make sounds and scare bad people away. Sarah remembered the inexplicable events of recent weeks, the objects that had fallen in Dr. Foster's office, the electronic failures during the final confrontation, the garden tools and furniture that had somehow attacked Jennifer and Martinez in the backyard. The forensic team couldn't explain the physical evidence from your backyard, Detective Chin admitted. The impact patterns on the suspect's injuries are consistent with being struck by multiple objects, but there's no indication of how those objects achieved the velocity necessary to cause such damage. Thomas protected us, Emma said simply, just like he promised he would. Over the following weeks, as the investigation continued, more details emerged about Jennifer and Martinez's network. They had worked with other accomplices in different cities, sharing techniques and target identification methods. Sarah's case had been intended as their masterpiece, the most elaborate and psychologically sophisticated operation they had ever attempted. But Emma's connection to Thomas had disrupted their careful planning. Where previous victims had been isolated and gaslighted into submission, Sarah had received accurate warnings and protection from a source they couldn't neutralize or discredit. Thomas says he's proud that he finally got to help someone the way he wished he could have helped his mommy. Emma told Sarah one evening as they prepared for bed in their temporary apartment. They had decided to move from the house once the investigation was complete. Too much trauma was embedded in those walls. Will Thomas come with us to our new house? Sarah asked. Emma shook her head. He says his job is finished now. He's ready to go be with his mommy and daddy in the place where families go after they die. That night, for the first time in weeks, Emma slept without talking to Thomas. And for the first time since the nightmare began, Sarah slept peacefully, knowing that the danger was truly over. But she never forgot the lesson Thomas had taught them. Sometimes protection comes from the most unexpected sources, and love can transcend even death to shield those who need it most. Chapter 12. The Trap. 3 weeks after Jennifer and Martinez's arrest, Detective Chin contacted Sarah with disturbing news. Jennifer Hayes escaped from the psychiatric facility where she was being held for evaluation. Chin said over the phone, "It happened sometime during the night shift change. We have units watching your apartment, but I want you to consider protective custody until we recapture her." Sarah felt the familiar chill of fear return. How is that possible? I thought she was on suicide watch. She had help. Martinez managed to get a message to some of their network before his arrest. We're dealing with more people than we initially realized. Sarah's heart sank. She had hoped Thomas was at peace, that Emma could return to a normal childhood without supernatural guardians and dire warnings. But if he had returned, it meant the danger wasn't over. Detective Chun, Emma says Jennifer is planning to come here tonight. There was a pause. How could Emma possibly know that? The same way she knew everything else that kept us alive. After a moment, Detective Chun sighed. All right, I'm going to suggest something unconventional. What if we use Emma's information to set a trap? We know Jennifer is obsessed with completing what she started. If we can predict when and where she'll strike. You want to use my daughter as bait? I want to use her information to catch a killer. Emma will be completely protected. We'll have officers in the apartment, in the building, watching every entrance. But if Jennifer thinks she has an opportunity to finish her game, she might make the mistake we need to put her away permanently. What does Thomas think? Sarah asked her daughter. Emma tilted her head in that familiar listening pose. He says it's dangerous, but it's the only way to make sure the bad lady never hurts anyone else. He says he'll protect us, but we have to be very brave. That evening, Sarah's apartment was quietly surrounded by law enforcement. Detective Chun positioned officers in adjacent units, on the roof, and in unmarked vehicles on the street. Sarah and Emma were equipped with panic buttons and communication devices, and the entire building security system was monitored from a command post in the basement. But as night fell, Emma became increasingly agitated. Thomas is very worried, she told Sarah as they went through their bedtime routine. He says the bad lady has learned new tricks since she went away. She knows about the police, and she's going to try something different. Different how? He's not sure yet, but he says she's not coming alone, and she's not coming the way everyone expects. At 9:30 p.m., the building's fire alarm began blaring. Detective Chen's voice crackled through Sarah's radio. All units, we have a fire alarm activation. This could be a diversion. Stay alert. Within minutes, residents began evacuating the building through the main entrances, where police officers were stationed to monitor for Jennifer among the crowd. But Emma grabbed Sarah's arm as they headed for the door. Thomas says don't go outside. The fire alarm is fake, and the bad lady is waiting for us to come out where she can grab me in all the confusion. Sarah relayed this information to Detective Chun, who made the decision to keep them in the apartment while officers verified the fire threat. The building's sprinkler system hadn't activated, and no smoke was visible anywhere. At 10:15 p.m., the fire department confirmed there was no fire. The alarm had been triggered by a device planted in the building's electrical system. At 10:22 p.m., the power went out. In the darkness of their apartment, Emma's voice was calm but urgent. Thomas says she's in the building now. She came in through the basement when everyone was looking at the fire trucks outside. Detective Chen's radio crackled with static. All units, we've lost communication with the command post. Switching to backup frequencies. But the backup frequencies were also filled with static. Someone was jamming their communications. Emma led Sarah to the bathroom, the most interior room in their apartment. Thomas says to hide in the bathtub and pull the shower curtain closed. She's going to check every apartment, but she'll look for us in the bedrooms first. They huddled in the bathtub, listening to the sounds of systematic searching throughout the building. Doors were being forced open, furniture overturned, and occasionally they heard shouts from police officers who were clearly being picked off one by one. How many people are helping her? Sarah whispered. Emma listened to Thomas's response. He says at least 4 others. They've been planning this for weeks, ever since she escaped. They have weapons and special equipment to fight the police. At 11:47 p.m., their apartment door exploded inward. Sarah Mitchell, Jennifer's voice called out, no longer disguised or electronically altered. I know you're in here. Your little ghost friend can't save you from all of us. Heavy footsteps moved through the apartment, accompanied by the sounds of furniture being thrown around and walls being struck with what sounded like sledgehammers. We've learned so much since our last encounter. Jennifer continued conversationally. Did you know that electromagnetic fields can disrupt spiritual manifestations? We've invested in some very expensive equipment. Emma's grip on Sarah's hand tightened. Thomas says his power is being blocked by their machines. He can't move things or make sounds like before. The bathroom door handle turned slowly. Found you, Jennifer said softly. She stood in the doorway with 3 armed men, all wearing military-style gear and night vision goggles. In her hands was a device that hummed with electronic energy, the field generator that was neutralizing Thomas's ability to protect them. You've caused me considerable inconvenience, Jennifer said, stepping into the small bathroom. But I have to admit, the challenge has made this more satisfying than usual. She gestured to one of her accomplices. Take the child. We're leaving. As the man reached for Emma, the little girl looked up at Jennifer with surprising calm. You made a mistake, Emma said clearly. What mistake is that, sweetheart? Emma smiled. You thought Thomas was the only one protecting us. The lights suddenly came back on, blindingly bright after the extended darkness. Through the bathroom window, Sarah could see police vehicles surrounding the building. Not the local units that had been compromised, but federal agents who had been coordinating with Detective Chun as backup. The electromagnetic field generator sparked and died as the building's power surge overloaded its circuits. And in that moment, with his abilities restored, Thomas made his presence known. Every mirror in the bathroom shattered simultaneously, sending shards of glass flying toward Jennifer and her accomplices. The men dove for cover as the shower fixtures exploded, filling the air with scalding steam. In the chaos, Detective Chun and a team of federal agents stormed into the apartment, their shouts mixing with Jennifer's screams of rage and disbelief. As the smoke cleared and the last of Jennifer's network was taken into custody, Emma looked up at Sarah with tired but victorious eyes. Thomas says this is really the end now. The bad people can't hurt anyone anymore, and he can finally rest. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Sarah truly believed it was over. Chapter 13, Face to Face. In the aftermath of Jennifer's recapture, Sarah learned the full extent of the conspiracy that had targeted her family. The federal investigation revealed a network of predators operating across multiple states, with Jennifer and Martinez as the most successful team in what they called the Shepherd Project. They viewed themselves as teaching lessons to arrogant women, FBI agent Rebecca Torres explained during a debriefing session. In their minds, they were providing a valuable service by showing these women their vulnerability and dependence on male protection. Sarah sat in the federal building's conference room, still processing the psychological profile of someone she had considered a friend for years. How long was Jennifer planning this? According to her journals, which we found in a storage unit, she identified you as a potential target almost immediately when you started working together. Your divorce simply provided the opportunity she'd been waiting for. Agent Torres opened a thick file folder filled with photographs, documents, and handwritten notes. She documented every aspect of your life: Emma's school schedule, your work routines, your medical history, even your grocery shopping patterns. This level of surveillance went on for over 2 years. The photographs were particularly disturbing. Sarah recognized images of herself and Emma taken from hidden cameras, through windows, and from concealed positions in public places. Some showed Emma playing in their backyard, unaware she was being watched and studied like a specimen. The storage unit also contained souvenirs from their previous victims, Agent Torres continued. Personal items, photographs, recordings of their final moments. Jennifer kept detailed records of each case, including what she called improvement notes for future operations. Emma, who had been drawing quietly at a nearby table while the adults talked, suddenly looked up. Thomas wants to know if you found the special room. Agent Torres glanced at Sarah, then back at Emma. What special room, sweetheart? The one where they kept the other mommies before they hurt them. Thomas says it's hidden somewhere, and there might be people still trapped there. Sarah felt her blood freeze. Emma, are you saying there might be current victims? Emma nodded gravely. Thomas says some of the bad people's games take a very long time. They like to keep people scared for weeks or months before they finish. Agent Torres was already reaching for her phone. Emma, this is very important. Can Thomas tell you anything about where this room might be? Emma closed her eyes and was quiet for several minutes. When she opened them again, her expression was troubled. Thomas says it's underground, in a place that used to be for keeping food cold before refrigerators. It's near water, and there are train tracks close by. Within hours, federal agents had identified 3 possible locations matching Emma's description. The third location, an abandoned industrial complex near the river with underground cold storage facilities, yielded horrifying results. They found 2 women, both reported missing within the past 6 months, chained in a makeshift prison that had been designed to maximize psychological torment. Hidden cameras recorded their captivity, and speakers played recordings of their families' voices at random intervals, just out of reach through barred windows. Dr. Lisa Warren, a psychiatrist from Philadelphia, had been missing for 4 months. Maria Santos, teacher from Baltimore, had been gone for 7 weeks. Both were severely traumatized, but alive. During the rescue operation, Dr. Warren provided crucial information about Jennifer's methods and the broader network of accomplices. She told me this was all a lesson. Dr. Warren said through tears during her debriefing that I needed to learn my place, to understand that women like me were delusional, to think we could be independent and successful. She said once I accepted that, once I begged properly, she might let me live as her servant. The psychological profiles that emerged painted Jennifer as a highly intelligent sociopath with deep-seated misogyny disguised as protective paternalism. She genuinely believed she was helping her victims by breaking down their self-reliance and forcing them to accept male authority. She saw herself as a teacher. FBI psychologist Dr. Michael Ross explained to Sarah, in her mind, strong women were suffering from a delusion of independence that needed to be cured through controlled trauma. Maria Santos provided additional details about the network's operations. There were others who came to visit sometimes. They called it the Academy and said they were training other teams to work in different regions. They wanted to expand nationally. The investigation ultimately uncovered 7 active teams operating in 12 states, with over 40 victims identified. Jennifer's journals contained detailed plans for recruiting and training new shepherds, turning their psychological torture system into a franchise operation. But perhaps most chilling was the revelation that Emma and Sarah had been intended as Jennifer's masterpiece, a case study that would demonstrate the ultimate refinement of their techniques. She planned to keep detailed documentation of your psychological breakdown, Agent Torres explained. Your case was going to be her doctoral thesis, in a sense. Proof that even the strongest, most capable women could be reduced to helpless dependence. Emma, who had been listening to these revelations with the stoic acceptance of someone far older than her 6 years, finally spoke up. Thomas says she was wrong about one thing. What's that, sweetheart? She thought mommies who protect their children are weak and need help from men. But Thomas says his mommy was the strongest person he ever knew, and so is mine. The bad people just couldn't understand that kind of strength because they never felt love the way families do. As the sun set over the federal building, Sarah held Emma close and realized that their ordeal had taught them something Jennifer could never comprehend. True strength comes not from dominance over others, but from the fierce protective love that binds families together. And sometimes, that love is so powerful it can reach across the boundary between life and death to shield those who need it most. Chapter 14, The Battle Final. The federal investigation into the Shepherd Project continued for months, but Sarah and Emma were finally able to begin rebuilding their lives. They moved to a new city, where Sarah took a position at a children's hospital that had no connection to Jennifer or any of her associates. Emma started first grade at school, where she quickly made friends and seemed to be thriving. The drawings of Thomas became less frequent, replaced by pictures of classmates, teachers, and their new life together. But on a quiet Saturday morning in October, exactly 6 months after Jennifer's final capture, Emma came running into the kitchen with an expression of urgent concern. "Mommy, Thomas is back. He says we're in danger again." Sarah's heart sank. She had hoped they were finally free from the nightmare, that Emma could have a normal childhood without supernatural warnings and protective spirits. "What kind of danger, sweetheart?" Emma's face was pale with worry. "He says one of the bad people got away. Someone who was very important to their group. Someone who's been hiding and waiting for the right time to come after us." Before Sarah could respond, her phone rang. The caller ID showed Agent Torres's number. "Sarah, I need you to listen carefully. We've discovered that Jennifer had a partner we didn't know about, someone who was funding and coordinating the entire operation. He's been in hiding since the arrests, but our intelligence suggests he's planning to eliminate the witnesses who could testify against the network." "Where are we supposed to go?" Sarah asked, automatically checking the locks on their apartment door. "We're sending a protection detail to your location now." "But Sarah, this person is different from the others. He's military trained, extremely well-funded, and completely ruthless. Jennifer and Martinez were following his playbook, but he's the one who wrote it." Emma tugged on Sarah's sleeve. "Thomas says the bad man is already here. He's been watching our building for days, learning our schedule." Sarah relayed this information to Agent Torres, who immediately dispatched additional units. But as Sarah moved to the window to watch for the approaching federal vehicles, Emma grabbed her arm. "Don't look outside. Thomas says he's watching through a telescope from another building. If he sees you at the window, he'll know we know he's there." They moved to the interior bathroom, following the same protocol that had saved them before. But this time felt different, more dangerous, more final. "Thomas says this man killed his own partners when they became liabilities," Emma whispered. "He doesn't want to teach lessons like the others did. He just wants to make sure no one can ever tell people about what they did." 20 minutes later, the building's fire alarm began ringing. "Not again," Sarah muttered, but Emma shook her head. "This time it's real. Thomas says the bad man started a fire in the basement to force everyone outside. Then he's going to shoot people as they run away." Sarah called Agent Torres, but the call went straight to voicemail. Either they were in a dead zone, or someone was jamming communications again. The smell of smoke began to seep under their bathroom door. "We have to get out," Sarah said. "But if he's waiting outside with a rifle?" Emma's expression was determined beyond her years. "Thomas says there's another way. The roof." They made their way through the smoke-filled hallway to the building's stairwell. Other residents were streaming toward the exits, but Sarah and Emma climbed upward, following Emma's guidance toward the roof access. The roof was windy and cold, with a clear view of the surrounding buildings. Emma pointed toward a tall office building about 3 blocks away. "Thomas says he's up there, on the 10th floor. He has a big gun, and he's watching the front of our building." As if to confirm Emma's words, Sarah heard the crack of rifle fire from that direction, followed by screams from the street below. "Thomas says we have to get to the next building," Emma said, pointing to an adjacent apartment complex with a roof only about 6 feet away. "The police are coming, but they don't know where the shooter is." Sarah looked at the gap between buildings. It was a manageable jump for an adult, but dangerous for a 6-year-old child. "I can't ask you to do that, Emma. It's too risky." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but her voice was steady. "Thomas says if we don't, the bad man will kill lots of people trying to get to us, and then he'll come up here anyway." More gunfire erupted from the sniper's position, and Sarah could see police vehicles arriving on the scene, their occupants taking cover as bullets struck the pavement around them. "Thomas says he'll help me jump," Emma said, "but you have to go first so you can catch me." Sarah made the leap to the adjacent rooftop, her heart hammering as she landed hard on the gravel surface. Then she turned and held out her arms to Emma. "I'm scared, Mommy," Emma called out. "I know, baby, but Thomas is with you, right?" Emma nodded, took a deep breath, and jumped. For a terrifying moment, she seemed to hang in the air, too far away for Sarah to catch. But then an invisible force seemed to push her forward, and she landed safely in her mother's arms. From their new position, they could see federal agents surrounding the office building where the sniper was positioned. The gunfire stopped abruptly, followed by the sound of flashbang grenades and shouted commands. Emma looked up at Sarah with exhausted relief. Thomas says it's really over now. The last bad person can't hurt anyone anymore. Is Thomas leaving again? Emma nodded. He says he's proud of how brave we were, and he says his mommy would be proud too. As police and federal agents secured the scene below, Sarah held Emma close and whispered a final thank you to the protective spirit who had watched over them through their darkest hours. The nightmare was finally, truly over, and they had survived it together. Chapter 15, Intervention Divine. The final confrontation with Jennifer's network left Sarah and Emma emotionally drained, but physically unharmed. The sniper, revealed to be Colonel Marcus Reed, a disgraced military officer who had been the financial architect behind the Shepherd Project, had been captured alive after a rooftop standoff with federal agents. Reed's interrogation provided the missing pieces of the conspiracy puzzle. He had developed the psychological torture protocols during black operations overseas, then adapted them for domestic use against women he viewed as threats to traditional social order. He saw strong, independent women as enemy combatants in a cultural war. Agent Torres explained to Sarah during the final debriefing. Jennifer and the others were just foot soldiers in his larger campaign. The investigation had uncovered training facilities, funding networks, and recruitment pipelines that stretched across multiple countries. Reed had been building what he called a correction system for society's most dangerous elements, women who refused to accept male authority. But despite the scope of the conspiracy, Emma seemed remarkably resilient in the aftermath. She started second grade in their new city with enthusiasm, made friends easily, and rarely mentioned Thomas anymore. When she did speak of him, it was with the fond nostalgia of someone remembering a helpful friend from long ago. Thomas says he's happy in the place where children go after they die. Emma told Sarah one evening as they read bedtime stories together. He says his mommy and daddy were waiting for him there, and they're proud of how he helped us. Do you miss him? Emma considered this seriously. A little bit, but mostly I'm glad he doesn't have to worry about protecting people anymore. He can just be a regular little boy now. Sarah had been seeing a therapist to process the trauma of their ordeal, and Dr. Patricia Mills had helped her understand the psychological mechanisms that had made their survival possible. Children's intuition is often more accurate than adult reasoning, Dr. Mills explained. Emma may have been unconsciously processing threat signals that your conscious mind couldn't recognize. Her conversations with Thomas's gave her a framework for expressing and acting on that intuition. But what about the physical phenomena? The objects that moved, the electronic failures, the way Jennifer and her accomplices were attacked in our backyard? Dr. Mills smiled gently. There are many things we don't fully understand about the intersection of psychology, perception, and physical reality. Whether Thomas was a genuine supernatural presence or a manifestation of Emma's protective instincts, the important thing is that he helped you both survive. As the months passed, Sarah found herself able to think about their experience with gratitude rather than terror. Thomas, whatever he had been, had given them the warnings and protection they needed when conventional help wasn't available. Emma's drawings had returned to typical childhood subjects: rainbows, princesses, animals, and family portraits. But she kept one special picture of Thomas in a frame on her bedside table, a drawing showing him smiling and waving goodbye, with his mother and father standing beside him in a bright, peaceful place. He wants us to remember that love is stronger than scary things, Emma had explained when she made the final drawing, and that families protect each other even when they can't be together anymore. 1 year after Jennifer's arrest, Sarah received a call from Agent Torres with news that brought their story full circle. The Thompson house is going up for sale again, Torres said. The new owners want to renovate it completely, update all the electrical and plumbing, remove the hidden passages, basically modernize everything. That sounds like a good idea, Sarah replied. Maybe it can be a happy home for some family. Emma might be interested to know that they're planning to add a garden memorial to honor Thomas and his mother, a place where people can remember that love and protection can come from the most unexpected sources. When Sarah shared this news with Emma, now 7 years old and thriving in her second grade class, her daughter smiled with quiet satisfaction. "That's nice," Emma said. "Thomas would like that. He always wanted his house to be a place where families could be safe and happy." That night, as Sarah tucked Emma into bed, her daughter asked a question that had been on her mind for weeks. "Mommy, do you think other children have friends like Thomas who help them when they're in danger?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "I think there are many different kinds of protection in the world, sweetheart. Sometimes it comes from living people like police officers and doctors. Sometimes it comes from inside ourselves, like being brave and smart. And sometimes it comes from love that's so strong it never really goes away." "Yes," Sarah said, kissing Emma's forehead. "Sometimes it comes from love that's so strong it never really goes away." As Emma drifted off to sleep, Sarah sat by her bedside for a few extra minutes, grateful for the mysterious forces that had watched over them during their darkest hour. Whether Thomas had been supernatural, psychological, or something in between, he had taught them that protection and love could transcend even death, and that was a lesson worth carrying forward into whatever challenges lay ahead. Outside Emma's bedroom window, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the oak tree in their yard, a sound like a child's laughter, distant but warm, fading peacefully into the night. Chapter 16. Peace and Farewell. 2 years had passed since the final confrontation with Jennifer's network. Emma was now 8 years old, the same age Thomas had been when he died, though she bore a little resemblance to the frightened 6-year-old who had once relied on warnings from a ghostly protector. Sarah had been promoted to chief of pediatric medicine at their new hospital, and Emma was thriving in 3rd grade, where she was known for her kindness to other children and her uncanny ability to sense when classmates were troubled or afraid. Emma has a gift for making other kids feel safe, her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, told Sarah during a parent conference. When new students are nervous or when someone's having a hard day, she seems to know exactly what to say to help them feel better. Sarah smiled, recognizing the echo of Thomas's protective nature in her daughter's developing personality. Emma had learned from her supernatural guardian not just how to recognize danger, but how to offer comfort and security to others. The nightmares had stopped completely, replaced by peaceful dreams that Emma rarely remembered, but that left her resting easily through the night. The urgent conversations with invisible companions had faded into occasional quiet moments when Emma would tilt her head as if listening to distant music, then smile and return to her normal activities. On a crisp Saturday morning in October, exactly 3 years after their ordeal began, Emma made an announcement that caught Sarah by surprise. "I want to visit Thomas's house today," she said over breakfast. "Not to live there or anything, just to see how it looks now." Sarah had deliberately avoided driving past the Thompson house during their previous visits to settle legal matters related to the case. The property had been sold to a young couple with twin toddlers who had indeed renovated it extensively and added the memorial garden that Agent Torres had mentioned. "Are you sure you want to see it, sweetheart? It might bring back some scary memories." Emma shook her head confidently. "Thomas isn't there anymore, so it's just a regular house now. But I want to see the garden they made for him and his mommy." They drove through their old neighborhood, which looked smaller and more ordinary than Sarah remembered. The house where they had lived, where they had been hunted and terrorized, looked peaceful and well-maintained, with children's toys scattered across the front lawn and flower boxes in the windows. The memorial garden was beautiful, a small corner of the front yard enclosed by a white picket fence, with a bench surrounded by roses, daffodils, and other flowers that bloomed throughout the seasons. A simple stone marker read, "In memory of Thomas and Julie Thompson, and all families who found strength in love." Emma studied the garden for several minutes, then nodded with satisfaction. "It's perfect," she said. "Thomas would be really happy that his house has kids playing in it again, and that people remember his mommy was brave." As they walked back toward their car, Emma paused and looked back at the house one final time. "Thank you, Thomas," she said quietly, "for keeping us safe and teaching us how to be brave." For just a moment, Sarah could have sworn she heard the faint sound of a child's laughter carried on the autumn breeze. But when she looked at Emma, her daughter was smiling peacefully, no longer listening for voices that only she could hear. "Is he really gone now?" Sarah asked gently. Emma nodded. "He went to be with his family a long time ago, but he left something behind." "What did he leave?" Emma thought carefully, searching for the right words to explain something that existed beyond normal vocabulary. "He left the feeling that kids can be protected even when they're scared, that mommies and daddies who love their children are stronger than bad people, and that sometimes help comes from places you don't expect." As they drove home through the ordinary suburban streets, Sarah reflected on how profoundly their lives had been changed by their encounter with Thomas. Emma had learned that she possessed inner strength and intuitive wisdom far beyond her years. Sarah had discovered that maternal love could overcome even the most sophisticated predators, and both of them had experienced firsthand that protection and love could take forms that transcended conventional understanding. That evening, as Sarah tucked Emma into bed, her daughter made one final observation about their supernatural guardian. "You know what the best thing about Thomas was?" "What's that, sweetheart?" "He showed us that even when really bad things happen, there's always someone who cares enough to help, even if they can't be there in person, even if they're different from us, even if other people don't believe in them." Emma paused, then added with the wisdom of someone much older, "And now we know that we can be that kind of help for other people too." As Sarah turned off the bedroom light, she realized that Thomas's greatest gift hadn't been the supernatural protection he had provided during their crisis. It had been the lesson that love creates an unbreakable chain of protection that connects all families across time and space. Outside Emma's window, the night was quiet and peaceful. No mysterious voices, no urgent warnings, no ghostly guardians keeping watch in the darkness. Just the ordinary, precious silence of a child sleeping safely in her mother's care, protected by love both seen and unseen, in a world where help can come from the most unexpected places. And in that silence, Sarah finally understood that they were going to be all right. The end.